Good morning. It is the last Monday of July. The weather has been scorching as of late, so I hope you're staying cooler and staying safe. Today, we got a hot one for you today. So it won't matter whether you're inside or outside, it's going to be hot regardless. As we have Pastor Eugene with us to discuss some current events. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
And I am Eugene Kim.
Oh, yeah, you are. Yep. We have Pastor Eugene with us today. And Pastor Eugene, we missed you on the podcast for the past couple of weeks. And we're supposed to do a Young and Gathered episode this week. However, there were some pressing current event matters that I wanted to discuss with you this morning. So how are you doing? How much sleep have you been getting?
Sometimes 0, sometimes 3.
So nothing in between? Just
sometimes 0 or 3. Yep.
All right, I hope you get a lot of sleep. Speaking of sleep, yeah, they're Sleepy Joe. So I wanted to get into some current events that have been circulating that I just wanted us to just perhaps see through a biblical lens and know how to and be equipped to have these conversations with other Christians and even non-Christians as well. But the first one is a story that was widely circulated and was certainly hotly debated in the past couple weeks. That story is unfortunately of a 10-year-old girl that was raped by a 27-year-old man. And I think a lot of this conversation has been on the issue of abortion, and we'll get to that. But I think, we should always take a moment and acknowledge this egregious sin. The fact that a 10-year-old girl was raped by a man on more than one occasion. And so I think it's important for us to also acknowledge and vocalize that this is a disgusting and evil sin that must be punished by the full extent of the law. Any comments on that before we continue, Puge?
I think there's going to be a lot of similar scenarios that are going to be brought up. What ifs, or, what do you call those scenarios when they're like, oh, if you don't press this button, then 3 people are going to die. But if you press the button, only one person is going to die.
A pickle.
Trolley problem. The reason why more and more of these scenarios are coming up is because obviously they need to fit this narrative that abortion is a good and a necessity.
Right. And
so this 10-year-old girl's story came out, but people couldn't find out the details. And now we're finding out the details. And now these, pro-abortion leaders have stopped using the story because a lot of the details didn't make sense. First of all, we don't know who this girl was.
Yep.
Apparently, because she was raped, she had to cross state lines to get an abortion because it was illegal in the state that she was in.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people started to comment that these details didn't add up. And so what we found out later was that this was indeed a rape, but it was by an illegal immigrant.
Yep.
That's why, because if it was rape, then there would have been police reports. People should be in jail, things like that. And none of these things were happening. Apparently, all they cared about, promulgating was that she needed this abortion. But when you went to the mother of this alleged girl that was raped, she didn't want to comment. She didn't press charges. And things like that. So all these things didn't make sense because it didn't fit the narrative that they're going to push. And we're going to see more and more stories like this because the narrative that needs to be pushed is that abortion is a good and that we need abortion. It's a necessity. And especially in these made up scenarios that people are going to start bringing forth to you. Because it didn't fully fit that narrative, they stopped using that story, which is to their shame, in my opinion. We've said this before. If you rape people, I believe castration should be part of the punishment that should be used. But abortion is completely different. This is this is a life. So when you say because of rape you need an abortion, you're saying that because of rape another life needs to be condemned, and
Right.
an innocent life must be killed because of this horrific act. And that's where it doesn't make sense. It's not coherent. The argument isn't coherent. And so that's why pro-life people continue to make that case that life is precious, and life is a gift, life is something that we must protect.
So, in a newspaper article that I read by the Columbus Dispatch, the reason why the girl had to travel across state lines to get to Indianapolis to have this abortion done was because after the overturning of Roe vs. Wade, there was a federal judge in Ohio that lifted the injunction on Ohio's heartbeat law, which does not allow abortions to happen after a heartbeat is detected, which is around 6 weeks of pregnancy. And so the fact that this girl was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant, she could not receive an abortion in Ohio, and Ohio doesn't make any exceptions for rape or incest. They actually don't make any exceptions other than the health of the mother. So because of that, she traveled to Indianapolis to get this abortion, is what I have read. There was also some debate on the health of the mother. I think a lot of people were concerned because this is a 10-year-old girl. This is, I think, someone who's, I think if you're 10 years old, you're in second grade or you're in third grade. And being a mom at that age is truly a scary thought. But I've also heard that the health risks aren't really necessarily dependent on the age, but it's really the maturity of the individual. So I guess that was kind of the talking point that a lot of people had regarding this issue. But I'm just wondering, as Christians, how do we, I guess, wisely talk about this? I think this one more than others, this scenario more than others, might spark a lot of anger when you talk about this. So as Christians, how are we to think about this? How do we wisely talk about these things with others? And yeah, what do we do here?
I mean, this person is currently in jail, from what I know.
The doctor?
The person that raped
Oh,
allegedly, right? And so, he confessed to raping. For us, it's really about, do you know the facts, or do you let emotion get to you? And this
mm,
is what, unfortunately, even the president of the United States used. And to quote him, he said, 10 years old, raped, 6 weeks pregnant, already traumatized, was forced to travel to another state. Imagine being that little girl.
yeah,
And these are all false. This is a false statement that he said. Um, and so these are things where, people will use to say we need abortion. Again, abortion is where you take another life of a kid,
uh-huh,
and they'll always try to make some kind of case where this would be a necessity. And now we're seeing these lies, misinformation coming out where miscarriages will be prosecuted, or ectopic pregnancies won't be allowed to be treated, and things like that. It's all not true. This is all false. There is no state that will not treat ectopic pregnancies, and there's no state that will charge a mother for having a miscarriage. That's just a lie that people are continuing to use, and I think that's the desperation of the pro-abortion advocates, that they'll continue to use. They'll just use these desperate lies with these false narratives again and again and again. And so for us, we just have to be wise. We have to be discerning. We got to know the facts before you start, um, investing and putting your, I guess, putting your weight behind a stance.
yeah.
You just gotta do your research, and sometimes we don't know all the details yet. And so I am thankful for people who heard this story and said, you know what, some of the details in the story just doesn't make sense. Let's do some digging. And it's because of people like that we have found out more about this particular story. I'm positive that more stories will come out and that people will try to use stories similar to this one, but will, kind of shape it and shift it so that it fits their narrative. But yeah, this is something that we ought to really be mindful of. And people who have, stood behind this whole statement, like 10 years old, raped, terrible that she had to cross state lines to get an abortion because it was illegal in Ohio or something like that.
Yeah.
You see any of them retracting those statements? And the answer is no. So that's one thing that we should be very careful of. If you are, backing a statement, if you're backing a stance and you find out you're wrong, then you should apologize. You should retract those statements. And that is a Christianly thing to do. But very unfortunately, people are not doing that.
Could you just clarify what you meant when you said that the president, when he said those statements, that he had lied? Was it because those statements weren't proven at the time that he made those statements? Is that what you meant?
He didn't have any details about it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and so the fact that he said that without any details was deceptive
Yeah.
of him to use that, and he kept on using that story until more details about the story came out, and those statements that he said wasn't actually fully true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any other questions on the abortion issue or how Christians are to view abortion, we did do a couple episodes. We did, I think, one episode and then a couple episodes following that with Q&As. And so you can find those in our 105 episode library of episodes, if that makes sense. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. We'll just keep tracking with this story.
I think people people will continue to double down on stories too. That's something that will probably infuriate people.
Yeah.
Like I know for a fact that CNN came out and said this was true, fact check true, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so if you doubt any of the stories that we're peddling, then you are a right wing, extremist or something to that effect. And in fact, I am looking at an article right now by Brian Stelter, and it's titled "Some Media Outlets Backtrack as Authorities Confirm Story About 10-Year-Old Rape Victim Who Sought Abortion." This is dated July 14th, and so last week. And so, they're just confirming, so this is absolutely true because there was a 10-year-old girl who did get raped and things like that. So this is definitely something where we see that if you are skeptical about something, then you must be a right-wing skepticist. If you are, if you're not, then you better just hook, line, and sinker take everything we feed you, which is basically what Brian Stelter is writing here. And so this is something that I think people are getting more and more frustrated about, and that we don't want to take anything for at face value now. Unfortunately, what the news media says, now we just need to fact check things ourselves, which is unfortunate.
Right.
I think a detail that I wanted to add was that if you were so first, this story was reported by a doctor who told another doctor that this was happening. According to my research, you didn't have to leave Ohio to get treated, whatever it was, and yet you went to Indiana. The question is why. Secondly, if there was a rape that happened, then the doctor who did not report it committed a crime. Because if you had a 10-year-old that was raped, where's the police report? Where's, what did the doctor do once they found out? What about if it's hearsay? And so I believe that there was an account. So the account that we've heard about this 10-year-old girl was from a doctor named Caitlin Bernard, who was in Indianapolis, who said it, who kind of made this big. And so why didn't she then report it to the authorities? Why was this just used as a political chess piece? And so a lot of shady things are happening. But, whether we recognize it or not, people really don't care about the truth. Is this person going to get convicted? What's going to happen to this person? Is this person really the rapist? All these questions come up because even when I believe it was Fox News went to interview the mom refused to answer, just said everything was a lie, and then closed the door on them, right? And so those are things that we're seeing, which is really fascinating in the sense that people really don't want the truth of the story because it's the story that matters, right? It's not
Uh,
the narrative that you want to bring up. I get it that you could flip it to the other side where maybe quote unquote right wingers will want this story to be fake or something like that, and you just want to keep on pushing that one. But if you are a Christian, then your commitment to the truth has to be there. And so we just want to know the truth. Why is that being stifled? And so I think that's something that we should also keep in mind. I am pretty upset that this has gotten the national media attention it has, and I do believe it is because even the president of the United States referenced this story that, and it was not true. Or the facts that he was saying was not true.
yeah.
If indeed she was raped, if indeed she did get an abortion, if all these things happened, then how come these other things weren't answered? And how come we don't care about those other things about, even the doctor reporting and not reporting a crime rather? And we don't know all the details. I don't know if we should do either. And I just think it's terrible that this story was used by the president and other political agents, whether it's CNN or another, let's say, congressperson, whatever it is, right? But yeah, in that sense, then we would have to be very wary that this crime wasn't reported. Nothing, even the Ohio AG said, this nothing like this even came up to his desk, and so those are things like we should just be, I don't know, aware of. Where is the criminal investigation in that sense? Who's hiding what information, what detail? I just find this story to be a story that people want to just use to say, let's say, if you deny it, then you must be a right winger, or if you're promulgating it, you must be a left winger, because it's just the narrative that you want to push, right? And so that's the bottom line. You just want to push narrative, and then you want to take these stories to fit that narrative. And I think then you're the problem. And so that's something that we have to be very careful of. This is something that we want to get to the bottom of. But because it's already politicized, because it's already out in the news media cycle, it's being scrutinized to the degree where we just want to fit it into this narrative, which is why I think this is a bad story.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and anyway, people are saying that she didn't have to travel to Indiana. So
Wait, why are they saying that?
because in Ohio law, uh, if she was 10 years old, like she would have fallen under the exception where
Health.
her health would have been in danger because she's too young and she may not have been fully developed and things like that.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't have had to travel out of state. So this whole narrative falls apart. The reason why they're pushing it is because they just wanted the simple fact is politicians, including the president, just wanted to use this story to show that abortion is a necessity when it wasn't. It's a little more complex, and so more details will come out. But yeah, obviously, it's not as simple as politicians are making it. That's the
Yeah.
point.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Speaking of President Biden, he's been on the news again. And now it seems like the left and the right are both poking fun of the 46th president of the United States. Their concerns about the mental state of the president. I feel like that concern is growing more and more as the longer that he stays in office. And it seems that both sides are disapproving of him being president. There was a video of President Biden literally reading the teleprompter, including the directions on how to read it. Like, what was it? Like, pause, repeat the line, something like that. He read those things out loud in his speech because he's just reading the teleprompter. There are videos of him falling asleep while meeting with a foreign official. And now the latest one is Biden announcing mid-speech at a former coal-fired power plant that he has cancer, which would be a huge announcement. And then the White House immediately responded by saying that he was speaking of non-melanoma skin cancers, which he had removed prior to his presidency. But it's interesting enough that his doctor had previously linked that to sun exposure and not the oil emissions from oil refineries that he claimed gave him this cancer. His cancer announcement was met with skepticism and confusion. And it really seems like Biden has a lot of moments like this where his intelligence, his mental fortitude, and the validity of his claims are always in question. So why do I bring this up? I was just thinking through this episode, and there are a lot of memes, there are a lot of jokes, especially on Twitter and Instagram and social media, just poking fun of President Biden. But how are Christians supposed to react or respond, I guess, to poor leadership? That's really my question, because a lot of people are making memes or jokes or videos on social media and all that. But are Christians supposed to be doing that? Are Christians supposed to be different? How do we honor those to whom honor is due, especially when we feel that their leadership is very shaky?
I mean, it's just a fact now that the leader of our country is an octogenarian. He's 79 years old, almost 80. And he is in mental and physical decline. And it's very apparent. The way he walks, the way he talks, he's very, very old. And whether you like him or don't like him, this is just a fact that you will have to accept. If you want to make fun of him, if you want to ridicule him or mock him, I believe that, this is something that we should recognize, that this is our leader that you're mocking. This is
Right.
someone that needs and has been, elected to lead this country. I think it shows the sad state of affairs that we are in, that we have a leader like this. I don't know if we should participate fully in that whole mocking thing. However,
Right.
I do believe memes are a glorious way of just representing our feelings in a more innocent manner. And so we're not in full derision or mocking, but it's just a meme where we're just showing the ridiculousness of our situation. And so there are some memes that I think I personally appreciate. Yeah, I'm not against memes or anything like that. I get that some people might be like, oh, this is not very Christian or Christ-like.
Right.
But no, I think some of them depict what kind of foolish state we are in, what kind of a foolish leader that we have chosen. And these memes depicting that are, I guess, ridiculing more about the situation that we're in. I mean, he said in a speech, like you said, that he had cancer, and then the White House press had to clear that up.
Yep.
Oh, he doesn't have cancer, or that he was talking about skin cancer, which didn't make any sense in the context that he was speaking in. Apparently, there were oil slicks that his mom had to wipe off of the windshield with windshield wipers, which doesn't make any sense because windshield wipers don't get oil off of your windshield. And so all these things just don't make any sense. And yet we're trying to make sense of it, which shows you how ridiculous everything is. It shows you the depravity of the state that we're in. And so what can you do but laugh sometimes? And I think memes kind of help you laugh through just how terrible of a situation we're in. And yeah, I'm not against that. I think if you know me, then I laugh at a lot of things. And it's not because I make light of it. It's because sometimes it is the most healthy response, just to laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of our situation and what we've gotten ourselves into because we have gone away from the Word of God.
So how do we pray? Because we always talk about praying for our leadership, praying for our country. Every Saturday as a church we gather together, and one of the topics that we pray together corporately is the prayer for our country. So how do we pray for the president? How are we going to do this?
I think I said this before, but I really like how Martin Luther prays for the king and for people that are in power and authority. You pray that their hearts are changed. It's still not too late for Joe Biden, President Joe Biden,
Yep.
because he's still alive. He may, um, you know, have a change of heart. By the mercy of God, he may turn his life back to Christ. And then things will get better. It
Yeah.
definitely would. However, if he does not, then Martin Luther did pray that the king be deposed, that he be gotten rid of quickly.
Right.
Because the more you have a corrupt leader or a leader that is incompetent, just not capable of leading or even having a coherent thought or speech, that's how far we are. It's not that his thoughts are bad, that we want to continue to, challenge and debate and say these policies and these ideas that you're spewing are not good. That's not where we are. We're beyond that, where he can't even have a coherent sentence in his speech, where he starts talking about oil slicks in his
Mm-hmm.
windshield,
Mm-hmm.
using windshield wipers to get
Mm-hmm.
rid of it. It's like, what is going on here? And how him and all his friends had cancer. And then how do you clean that one up?
Yeah.
That one's rough. Even if I put vegetable oil on your car, you wouldn't use windshield wiper fluid.
Right.
And
Right.
yet, if you had crude oil that was spilling all over your car, you would use a windshield wiper. Anyway, I'm sure people will try to defend that too. That's how insane we are. Now we'll just come up with some kind of scenario where you would use windshield wipers to get rid of the crude oil that's all over your windshield, and then talk about skin cancer, like it has anything to do with the former. In that sense, we would pray for mercy. Mercy would be getting rid of this incompetent, this anti-God leader. That would be mercy. And so, in that sense, this is how we ought to pray. We ought to pray that his heart either is changed or that he be deposed.
Thank you for that. I wanted to move on to another breaking story concerning antidepressant medication. And this is from The Guardian in the UK. Scientists have called into question the widespread use of antidepressants after a major review found no clear evidence that low serotonin levels are responsible for depression. And this is by the study's lead author, Joanna Moncrief. She says, many people take antidepressants because they have been led to believe their depression has a biochemical cause, but this new research suggests this belief is not grounded in evidence. And this is huge. We've discussed this before about Christians taking antidepressant medication, but this is huge. In light of this evidence, could we just reiterate the Christian view of antidepressants?
There's a great book that I continue to, promote in our church, and this is a requirement for all our leaders to read, and that's by Martin Lloyd-Jones, and it's called Spiritual Depression. It's a bunch of his sermons on the topic that's compiled into one book, and the main theme of the book is to preach to yourself. People knew that people got depressed. This is it's a long-standing understanding that we had, that people do get depressed. This is not some kind of denial that people get depressed. However, in the last few decades, people like psychiatrists put depression to a chemical imbalance.
Yep.
And there was no study or evidence actually proving that. The evidence or studies were scanty. They weren't conclusive. And yet people started pushing these antidepressant drugs because, if it's a chemical imbalance, it must be because their serotonin levels are down. And just for those that don't know what serotonin is, it is a chemical that nerve cells produce, right? It sends signals to your nerve cells. So that's why people think that low serotonin levels will, make you more anxious or get you more depressed or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So they'll prescribe these medications, these drugs that would help stimulate that chemical. There's no link, and now we're finding out. In fact, not only was the evidence scanty, there's just no evidence, and we knew this, and yet we kept on pushing it with every DSM that came out. We kept on pushing it, and we kept on getting people hooked on these antidepressant drugs with no long-term progress
Yeah.
for any of these patients. And so now we're finding out the UK thankfully did this study. The US does not do this study because I don't know, because we're paid off. I'm not sure
Mm.
exactly why, but it's billions and billions of dollars, maybe estimated to be $15 billion worth of money that is in antidepressants that pharmacies are using. Uh, this is a terrible, terrible thing. This is an industry that, I don't know, pills like Prozac that have become a household name.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't know what Prozac is and things like that? When we knew that uh, this was wrong or this didn't work, these psychiatrists knew that didn't work. But now more than 10% of our American population is on antidepressants.
Mm.
The number is like 13%. With American women, it's as high as like 18%. We're prescribing these things to our kids now too. And we're messing with their chemicals when it's not a chemical issue. We knew. We knew for a long time. People that were in the know, psychiatrists also knew that this chemical imbalance theory just wasn't cutting it. And now we have studies showing that there is no link between low serotonin levels and depression. It's not something that will help people with depression. My surprise is that now there are studies showing that actually this doesn't have anything to do with it, and yet I think we'll see people still pushing antidepressants. That's how crazy and insane this is. And people are like, well, it has helped some people. And so you'll have people who have prescribed these drugs, um, will say, like, anecdotally, they're like, oh, it has helped some people. And my response has always been like, well, yeah, same with heroin. Why don't you just give them straight up opioids and give
Yeah.
them heroin, because they'll be addicted too, and they'll get a high off of it, and they'll
Right.
feel like, oh yeah, this is helping me. But the reality is, it's not helping. It doesn't help you because it's not a chemical imbalance. Depression is real. I'm not saying that depression isn't something that people suffer. Depression is real. We know now, like even Charles Spurgeon fought depression. But how do you fight depression? You fight it with the Word of God. You fight it with truth. You fight it with the truth that God has given us and what He shows us in His Word. That's how we fight it as Christians, and that's why I think that book, Spiritual Depression by Martin Lloyd Jones, is so good. And I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in this. But antidepressants do not work. In fact, they get you more hooked. And I think one of the things that I've continually been sharing, even in like sermons, is people have no out. There is no tapering off of these antidepressants. People just keep on taking it. And the question is, when will you take it up until? When will you take these drugs which push chemicals in your body? Until when? Until your body completely breaks down? Until you can't produce this chemical, naturally anymore because you keep on pushing it artificially? Like, these are things that we need to find out now. And I believe that there should be a reckoning for people who continue to push antidepressants.
Pastor Gene, what would be your, I guess, exhortation to those who may be on antidepressants currently, and also to psychiatrists, Christian psychiatrists that may still be prescribing these medications?
I mean, now that you know the truth, you have to stop. If you're on it, know that getting off it right away can be dangerous, but know that this is something that you ought to do. You should aim. Your goal should be to get off antidepressants.
Yeah.
But people knew for a long time antidepressants don't cure anything, but they're like, oh, but it helps me function day to day because once I get a depression bout, I'm paralyzed. I can't
Yeah.
do anything. But when I take these antidepressants, then I can do my day to day business.
Mm.
And that's what I'm saying is like, yeah, you can do that also with heroin, but yet we don't push heroin because we know that these are dangerous, dangerous drugs. And so once you get off it, we know that once you get off heroin, once you get off opioids, once you get off these drugs that manipulate chemicals in your body and hormones in your body, we know that you are better off for it. Even though in short term, right this moment, it might be tough. We know that long term it's good. So my recommendation would be get off it. And people, I have counseled people for a very long time, and even people listening to this podcast will know that when I counseled you, and then you asked me if it's okay to take antidepressants, my counsel has always been no, don't take it. Do your research, because we knew for a very long time that this wasn't working. Now it's in the mainstream media. Now there are studies being done that's saying this doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? There is no link between serotonin levels and depression. This is the same thing with like people who are hooked on these endorphin like spikes in their system, and they don't even know it. It's the whole like what I talked about with swiping up or swiping left, that kind of motion
Yep.
where you go through profiles or you go through videos through TikTok or Instagram, whatever it is. That kind of spike in those endorphin levels are actually bad for you. It's not good. Don't do it. Get off of social media. Get off of your Instagram. Don't make that your default. When you wake up, don't look at Instagram. When you're bored while you're eating, don't look at Instagram. Do
Right.
something else. And so this is something that we're continually seeing. The science, and when I say the science, I'm talking about research is coming out. And here's the thing about the science. The science is not a consensus. It means scientists don't come together and they take a vote on something, whether it's fact or not. This is why the whole climate change thing is just so insane. Like all these scientists say climate change is real. What does that have to do with anything? That doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And people keep on spewing that garbage sentence. Scientists believe that climate change is real. No. This is not what scientists do. Scientists come together and they do research and they publish their research. That's what science is. And then we see that, we see the results, we see the conclusion, and then we gather, facts from it. That's what science is. It's not like we think that there's climate change.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
there is the climate is changing. To what degree? To what degree is it man-made? That's scientific facts. Is it 3 degrees? Is it 2.5 degrees? What happens when it stays 3 degrees for more than 10 years? Higher than, it was before, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
That's science, not like global warming is really happening. All these scientists believe that the climate is warming or climate is changing and this is bad for us. We're going to die. That's not science. That's politics. And so we have to be able to discern between the two. It's unfortunate. And I think this is something that I grieve regularly, I suppose, but I grieve just the fact that science is not politicized. And now we say things like the science. And we saw Fauci say, this is the science, or I am the science. That's not true. That's insanity. No scientist in their right mind would say that they are the science. And so, I think, if I'm quoting, I think what he said was, when they're attacking me, they're attacking the science.
Yeah.
And so that is not something that a legit scientist would ever say. A politician would say that, though. And I think he is a good politician. I'm talking about Anthony Fauci, but I think a lot of people are using the science to really just push their political agenda.
Well, the science will be retiring at the end of President Biden's presidency. So
we'll see.
We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. If you have any questions on anything that is happening, current events, or even just anything that we've talked about so far, please don't hesitate to email us at podcast@cgsnj.org. Join us next week as we continue to talk about what is going on in our country, in our world. And Pastor Eugene, you wanted to end this episode by reading Hosea 4:6. I'll do that for us. This is Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being a priest to me. And since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. A sobering warning in the book of Hosea. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith. Peace.